Hi everybody, sorry about that. I know we had a bit of a technical issue to start with, but it's all sorted now. So hello and welcome. So welcome today to the Health and Wellbeing webinar. My name's Sarah Tiffany. Some of you have met me before. I know I've met Neil before. Who else have I met before? Anybody else that's been on some of the other webinars? No? Okay. So it's hi Hayley. It's nice to meet you all. So today I'll be presenting with the lovely Kev, who's to my left on the screen. I am one of the youth work specialists from MYA, and what we've decided to do is kind of change our direction with this a little bit, and rather than talk at you, we're going to talk with you. So we want to know what your experiences are out there, and we want to create some conversation with each other. We'll still pop people into breakout rooms to have some professional discussion as well. But what we really want to do is we want to hear from you, and we want to learn from each other as much as possible. So I'm going to pose the first question. We're going to have a conversation around that. Then I'm going to, and we'll probably pop you, we were going to pop people into breakout rooms to discuss that question, weren't we, Kev?
Yeah, we'll think about it, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to, and then Kev's going to talk about some tools that you can take away with you. We're going to talk about the 5 ways to wellbeing and the Thrive programme. And then we're going to have a little bit more discussion at the end, pop you into breakout rooms, talk about what's going on for you and ways to address young people's health and wellbeing. Okay, does that sound all right for everybody? Fantastic. So this is also going to be around you guys really getting involved. So we'd really like to hear your voices. We talk about participation of young people constantly. We want your participation. We want to know what's going on. Okay. So the first question that I've got then that I'd like us to, sorry, Kev.
No, I was just going to let people know, just for your benefit, we are recording the session with a view to posting it up on the website for people who can't make it today. So just so you know, if that's all right with everyone. If it isn't, well, yeah, let us know and we'll try and edit you out, I suppose. But if, well, yeah, is everyone all right with us recording the session and not broadcasting it, but putting it on our website? Excellent. Thumbs up from Mary Jane, thumbs up from Neil, thumbs up from Haley. Everyone else is silent, so I'll take that as a yes. Oh, I'm Keely. Nice one, Keely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry, Sarah. Go on.
That's all right. Bit of housekeeping, actually. I lost my train of thought then. So if there are any young people in the background, we've all got young people at home at the moment as well, and you need to keep your camera off, please feel free to, if there are people floating around in the background, of course, for safeguarding purposes. If you need to go to the toilet, if you need to answer the door to the Amazon person that's coming to deliver that we're having constantly, or whoever, go for it. Go for it, guys. You don't need to let us know. You don't need to pop it in the chat. If there are any burning questions, we'll have questions at the end. So only because I'll say monitoring the chat sometimes takes me away from what you're saying. So if we have kind of 5-10 minutes at the end for questions, then save all your burning questions until the end. If you can't turn your mics on, then please do pop some bits in the chat so that you can be involved, and we'll kind of monitor it throughout. All right.
So for the burning, we're not expecting a fire alarm today, but if you do have a fire, just leave your home by the nearest exit, then call the fire brigade.
Please just pop it in the chat if you have to. No, okay then, guys. Fabulous. Right, so moving on then. So what I've come up with a couple of questions around this that we can discuss, and what I'm going to ask the lovely Stephen to do, who's always in the background and you never get to see his face, is to pop you into breakout rooms, cut you in half, not literally, split you in half, pop you into breakout rooms so that you can discuss this question. Okay, so the first question is, what are the biggest challenges at the moment during the COVID pandemic in regards to young people and their health and well-being? What are we finding that are the biggest challenges? So if I could ask the lovely Stephen to pop you into a breakout room, you're going to have 10 minutes for this, and then I'm going to ask you to come back in and feed it back to us, if you would, please, guys. Okay, Stephen? Should see a little, it'll either pop you in automatically or you'll see a little invite. Fabulous. Hi, guys, welcome back. So in your breakout rooms, I asked you to discuss what were the biggest challenges currently during the COVID pandemic around young people's health and well-being. So I have in breakout room 1, if somebody could feed back out of Hayley, Keely, Matthew and Helen, that would be fabulous.
I think I was nominated. We were talking about, well, a few things came up, but around socialising and not being able to socialize in the same way, and you know the repercussions that digital socialization has if you miss out or if you misread a message and all of that. And then the other big thing that we came out was purpose. And you know, with not going to school or to get up to sit on a laptop, the same purpose isn't there. And if you've got your GCSEs, they're not going to be assessed in the same way, or it's different. And I think that motivation isn't there because you're not going down the same path. And then we spoke about future planning as well, and that independence, and not being there for young people, and that having that independence, that purpose, are all key things to well-being. And if they're not there, then that's going to have a massive impact, isn't it? That's a summary of what we said.
Absolutely, thank you. So breakout room 2 then, we've got Kimberly, Mary Jane, Neil, and how do I pronounce your name? Is it Gesil? How do I pronounce it?
No, sorry, it's Jaceel.
What a lovely name.
Thank you.
So Jaceel, Kimberly, Mary Jane and Neil, can we have a bit of feedback from your room as well, please? What did you come up with?
I don't mind going ahead with that one. Sort of mimicking what the other room were talking about, really. Connection was a big thing that we spoke about, socialising with their own age, even though the younger ones playing, lack of structure and routine, that value and purpose, again, was mentioned. The unknown for the future, exams, the outcomes, and not knowing what they're going to be because it's not the same as before where you might have got prediction. So lack of knowing what you're going to get, what the future might hold, missing out on social interaction, even more disadvantaged than they were before because of course digital technology and everything. We also had a good chat about sort of the mental health side of things in terms of interventions made for mental health for young people, and how increasingly it's even worse than it was before. And that was thanks to Neil with some figures and stuff on that. It was good. Absolutely.
And there's a lot out there at the minute for this week about young people and their mental health, because it is Young People's Mental Health Week, and Mind are really pushing. And in terms of what young people are struggling with at the moment, being inside with families, dealing with families' mental health also, as well as their own, understanding it, being able to have those conversations with people. So there's really some really good conversations there that you've had, guys.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that both groups seem to have not necessarily focused on, but the first thing that's come into the conversation has been mental health. Would you think that that's probably the biggest impact then? Is that something? Are you coming across that in your practice? Or are you practicing actually? That's something worth knowing. Are you actually doing work with young people at the moment, and what are they saying?
I can share
Yeah,
something. So the group that I run is specifically for young people that might be struggling with their mental health anyway.
Nice.
And we normally provide like using activities to provide coping strategies, and those normal things that we would help them to do and use to cope, they might normally use to cope. They're just not using them because they're just so focused on, you know, the current situation in terms of school and things like that, that the normal things that they might use aren't being used. But then we can't help them to provide new things because, you know, just having a conversation over Zoom or over the phone, they just don't feel comfortable engaging in that way.
Yeah, having talked to some young people about, you know, we made a massive assumption that young people will be in this I say it all the time on every webinar, in this, you know, young people use this technology and they will be in this space. This is where young people are at. Actually, a lot of young people don't feel comfortable. Going back a long time ago to when I was 15, if I've seen my face on a screen, I'd have been, because I had issues around my body image, I'd have been really, really uncomfortable looking at myself. But even young people didn't know at the beginning how to turn the cameras off, or, you know, we made an assumption that people could use Zoom. And, you know, that's something that conversations having with a lot of youth workers through these webinars is actually some young people are really struggling with it. But then there's the flip side that other young people that we wouldn't have met necessarily in a face-to-face situation are engaging, and we're meeting other young people in different spaces. So there is that side of things as well. But then is there that overkill of they're on 5 lessons a day, you know, online, and are they struggling to be in that space? Is that the kind of thing that you're hearing from young people? Are they engaging? Is anyone doing, so Keely's talked about doing her online work. Is there anybody else that's doing any online support of young people at the minute?
Yeah, I'm doing weekly sessions with young carers through Zoom. I find the age 5 to 11, there's a lot more engagement than the 11 to 18. They just don't feel comfortable on it, as you said.
Yeah, some young people are really struggling.
And Kimberly, because I'm young carers isn't an area of my expertise, but I know a little bit about it. Most of the work, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of the work with young carers is that a lot of it depends on connection and sort of respite, to get people out of the house, to get people meeting with other people, because they're not able to do that as freely as others. Is that right? And presumably, if that is right, then the pandemic's had a huge impact on them.
Yeah, definitely. The young carers group is some of their only way they socialise, because they don't socialise outside school. Right. And a lot of them struggle with friendships in school. So here is a place where they can make friendships.
This is it. And, you know, not being able to leave young people in the room on their own, if you like, in these spaces as well, is, you know, so we would at youth clubs, at, you know, drop-in centres, everywhere that we do, young people would have that interaction on their own, right, without an adult present, so that they can have conversations and build relationships. But we're in a position, if we're online, that we can't leave them in a space on their own to have those, I hate the word normal, but the, you know, the usual interaction that they'd have with young people. So there's always an adult present as well.
Yeah.
Which makes really.
I've found as well that the older ones, the ones that do join, they're quite quiet, and I have to lead it. Whereas the younger ones is a lot more natural and a lot more silliness. They just like to show everything they've done, and but the older ones are, yeah, they're definitely struggling.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked a lot about mental health, but there's other, you know, health and well-being needs of young people, isn't there? Are they moving around enough? Are they getting up, being active, getting out? Are they eating well? Are they hydrating well? They're sitting still all day. Sexual health services for young people. You know, there are going to be some young people that are still meeting as well. Have young people shared any experience? Is that something that they can use at the moment? Have young people shared any experiences around that? Young people that use the gym for their mental health as well. But no one's shared anything. Young people haven't talked about it, which probably means it's not being accessed, right? So in terms of, you know, particularly I live and have worked in a rural community, as I said on the last webinar, the buses here have been cut to every 2 hours. So if a young person did need emergency contraception, it's very difficult to get into a doctor's surgery at the moment, because it's something that, you know, we're trying, they're completely overwhelmed with vaccinations, etc. And then sexual health services are in the, you know, the next town as well. So in terms of young people's health and well-being, do they know where their services are? Is there enough out there? Is there enough going on as well? So in terms of that well-being, we always focus on mental health, which is a huge part of it as well. But is that a service that is going unnoticed as well for young people? It'd be quite interesting. Although they shouldn't be mixing, we do know that young people probably are mixing as well. Fabulous. Right, so off the back of that then, having had those conversations, what I want you to do now, we're going to pop you into breakout rooms, and what I want you to do is discuss good practice of what's happening at the moment. So tell us and tell each other about some of the really good practice that you've seen, that you've been part of, either not just during COVID, so good practice in general for health and well-being of young people. What's going on, what's happening out there, and what are you part of that's actually really, really good practice? Tell each other and share ideas. So Stephen, if you could pop these lovely people into a breakout room again for 10 minutes, that would be fabulous. And we'll see you back soon, guys. Hello, welcome back, guys. So then, we have asked you in your breakout rooms to discuss some good practice that you've seen that's going on, not just during COVID, around young people's health and well-being in general. So either your practice that you've been involved in, something that you've seen that you think is good practice. So I'm going to go back to the break. You were in the same breakout rooms as before. So the first one was Hayley's breakout room. Is there anybody that wants to share from that breakout room?
I'll share this time.
Fabulous, thanks, Hayley.
So we talked about good examples, good practice. Was Killy had given out a list of reputable websites where help was available. So this situation sort of actually got that list together, so at least young people could share it with each other and actually go to a reputable source of knowledge and information. Because we discussed the fact that some people assumed young people know what's out there, and of course they don't necessarily. So that was a really positive thing for contributing to health and wellbeing. And we talked about normally there'd be a safe space for exploring, for gaining independence, for making mistakes, and suddenly that is not there. But normally that would be a good practice example. So we judge where the boundaries are safely, but they're allowed to push those boundaries within limits, sort of thing. We talked about the fact that in normal practice you have opportunities for incidental conversations, that while you're doing another activity you might just end up chatting about something else that they really need to talk about, and that's more difficult now if it's in a situation like this, or even on a one-to-one you might have more opportunity to talk and discuss. But that also meant that the child or young person had to make that first move to get that help. Yeah. Whereas actually if you're in a group situation you might just have that conversation that they needed. We also talked about good practice examples being general signs of health and well-being. So whether they were looking happy, whether they were looking tired, whether they were withdrawn, all those things that you would pick up on in a general situation is more difficult now, because you might be getting just a snapshot of them in a meeting or a phone call, but they might be having a particularly bad day. But actually you would see all those things, like whether they were smiling, whether they were talking to anyone. And if you got regular contact, you would notice if something was off, but there would be a combination of signs, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We talked about those were examples of good practice, and how difficult some of those were currently. I think, is anything else anyone wants to add?
No, some really good points there, really, really good points, and particularly around that space for young people, like you say, to explore in terms of their own risk and their own risk assessments as well, in an online space that isn't necessarily something that's able to happen. They kind of conversations with each other and learn from each other in that way as well. So that's a really good example, thank you. Okay, so breakout room 2 then. We've got anyone from breakout room 2, which was Neil's group, that wants to feel feedback?
I don't mind feeding back. We had a really good chat again about social interaction, actually, and sort of what we've been up to or not up to in the pandemic, and that it's the social interaction that actually is really good practice, because the children, young people, are able to relax, they're able to talk, they're able to develop relationships. And of course, in this setting that we're in now, it's just really difficult to do that. Young people have dropped off from engagement because this isn't for them as well, and what's happened to those young people. So that was the main sort of stuff we chatted about, really, was that social interaction and that sort of knock-on effect that it has.
Absolutely. Okay. Anybody else from that group got anything to add? Okay. So feeding on from that, then moving on from that, we're going to go through. Oh, I've just got something in the chat. Sorry. Yeah, not a problem. If someone needs to leave, carry on, guys. That's not a problem at all. So Neil, if you need to go, but thank you very much. So he's got another session about young people who are engrossed with conspiracy theory. That's interesting as well. So that's a really good point, Neil, at the moment, that young people are really engrossed in this whole conspiracy theory that COVID is, a pandemic as well. And that's really, really, so that is, and you're going to a session, is that right, Neil, to talk about that? Well, to me, that's a sign of good practice, right? Because actually you're having those conversations with young people in a safe space, and young people are going to come along and it would be really good to hear about that, Neil, actually.
Yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. I think there's 2 or 3 sessions actually. This is the first introductory one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, people who just got more young people got more time on their hands now as well, haven't they? So they're probably online. So not probably, that's a bit of a general statement, but a lot of them will be online, just listening to stuff. And taking it all in, and it's how to sort of get them to think, hang on, get them to challenge that and critically think. And lots of young people can't critically think, can they, at this stage in their life? So the fact that they don't have youth workers in their lives that can help them think through and start to challenge some of those theories, they'll just take it as read. So I'm really interested in seeing what's going to be said in these sessions.
That I think that's a really good piece of good practice there, to have those conversations with young people and them to have them with each other and to be able to challenge each other's views as well, because there's some young people, there are some adults and all different ages that have different thoughts and feelings about it, and getting them to be in a space that they explore all thoughts and feelings about it and have those conversations is a fantastic idea.
And also, if they're in an environment where their parents are also, accepting what they're reading in the press and what have you, and it just doesn't help anything, does it? And it just exacerbates the issue. So, I'll let you know how that goes.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's good to know. That's good piece of good practice. So moving on from that, then we're going to go through a couple of slides now, so you'll have to bear with me while I share my screen, but we're going to be looking at the 5 ways to wellbeing. Kev's going to talk you through it, but we're going to also look at practice and how to address that as well. We're going to have some conversations around that. So
I was just going to say, before you start the slides, because there's some stuff, I did a session the other day about the youth work relationship, so I'll talk about that first, because I think I'll explain a bit about my job and why it's relevant, and then I'll go through the 5 ways to wellbeing stuff as well. So my job, I'm a youth workforce development officer, so part of my job is looking at how, making sure that we've got a youth workforce that's appropriate for the needs, and they're all well trained and all of that sort of thing. So part of that is looking at how the workforce is going to develop in the future, and a big bit of that work has been about how youth work can work in partnership or supporting or complementary to other sectors. And health is a key one, and there's a couple of examples of that I'll come up with in a bit. But yeah, so the reason I think youth work is really well suited for working with partner sectors, and I think we often miss this. I'm sure you may have heard that old trope that youth workers have about, we'll take the money from people and we'll do youth work anyway. My contention is that we should probably shout a bit about what makes youth work unique and special, because it brings something to other services, partner services, that they don't have. And what I'm talking about really is the youth work relationship. So youth work, what makes youth work unique is that we start with the development of this relationship, which is developed through a long process of getting to know young people, meeting them at a suitable time in a safe space or where they are with their peers, all of that sort of stuff. We take an interest in their lives, we find out what they're interested in, we negotiate where the work's going. And all of this leads to a relationship that's very, very different from any other professional relationship. So I would, to sort of crystallize that, I would argue that, I mean, you ask people why youth workers are good at developing relationships and good at engaging young people, the response you often get is, oh, it's youth work skills. But if you think about it, youth work skills aren't any different really to the skills of a good social worker or a good nurse. They're about communication, empathy, positive regard, all of that sort of stuff. They're not unique skills to youth work, but what is unique is the process that we go through to engage young people and the power balances between young people and youth workers. And what that leads to is this relationship that's very different, a bit closer, possibly, certainly more trusting, and certainly more equal than the relationship that young people have with pretty much any other service they're engaged with. And there's a colleague of mine, have any of you guys heard of a bloke called Graham Tiffany? No? Yeah? All right, have a look up Graham, he's fantastic. He's a street-based youth worker and a philosopher. He's got a blog. But he describes the youth work relationship as youth workers have been, and it's a beautiful phrase, being privileged witnesses of social reality. And what that means is that because we've got this close relationship and we work with young people where they are and attend to what's going on with their peer relationships in their communities and whatever else, we witness stuff and we're party to stuff that other services aren't. In addition, because we've got this close relationship, we're often, and this has been borne out in research left, right and centre, we're often among the first people that young people will talk to about any issue. So if you look at sort of mental health research particularly, young people will say that if they've got a mental health issue, they'll talk to their friends first and foremost, or they'll talk to their youth worker before their parents, before their teacher, before a medical professional. And that's a function of, I would argue, the uniqueness of the youth work relationship. And so those two things, so the fact that we have this close relationship, that we're able to, if you like, get sort of an early indication of health and well-being issues, whether that's from individuals making disclosures, whether it's from being particularly aware of what's going on culturally for young people in their neighbourhoods in terms of behaviour, in terms of sexual health, drug use, exercise, whatever else. Youth workers are kind of first there, if you like, and that's not only useful to the young people, it puts us in a position where we're able to react and intervene early. Yeah, I'm going to say you were in the chat there, Neil, weren't you? Yeah, voluntary is really important. Yeah, that's part of what forms it. But yeah, so that means that we are in a position where if an intervention or if some support or whatever is necessary, we're first on the scene, if you like, because we're often first to find out. It also, though, that relationship also puts us in a position where we can walk with young people through their engagement with other services. So if young people, we're not experts in health, we're not experts in crime, we're not experts in any of that, we are experts in relationship. And so we can offer that support to young people when they need to engage with the experts, which again increases their chances of, if they need support for mental health, for example, or with physical health or whatever else, it increases their chances of staying engaged with the expert services that they need to get support from. So those things I think are really, really valuable tools that youth work has in working with young people around health and well-being generally, but also in working, as youth workers, but also in working around health and well-being in partnership with other services, because we bring those things that those other services aren't able to bring. The next thing that I want to flag out, has anyone heard of, I'm presuming that some of you have, heard of the 5 ways to well-being? Thumbs up if you have. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through it quite quickly then, because for me, again, this is another sort of model that kind of crystallizes youth work's use, I suppose, and utility to young people in terms of health and well-being. So the first one of the 5 ways to well-being, as you may or may not be aware, is connect. So with people around you, with family, friends, colleagues, neighbours, homework, school, your local community. So this social connection is very important to well-being. It's good for your mental health and it's good for your physical health as well if you're getting out and you're active with other people. And well, I'll go through the 5 ways and then I'll talk about the relationship to youth work. So the first one is connecting, and it's pretty obvious what that is. Slip on to the next one. Or you're having trouble with the slides, Sarah?
Just bear with, sometimes it takes a minute to move on. I think my machine's a bit slow today. Just this sometimes.
Oh, there you go, being active. No. That's it. So yeah, the second one, and it's pretty obvious, but it's always worth saying, being active. So that's to do with physical activity, walking, running, cycling, playing football, playing table tennis, walking around and visiting your friends, all of that sort of stuff is essential to your well-being, mental and physical. And it's amazing how many people forget that physical activity is so useful to your mental health, actually. Go on, slip on to the next one. Take notice. So that's about being, people when they look at this one often think of mindfulness. So being aware of how you are in the moment and being aware of how you're feeling and all of that sort of stuff. I think take notice is a little bit more broad than that. It's about taking notice of your context. So, you could do it in a mindful way. So it could be if you're outside appreciating what you're seeing and where you're walking and all that. But it could be about taking notice of, the social and cultural things that are going on in your neighborhood. What's happening in the news? What's going on in the world? It's about being engaged and aware of your surroundings, whether they're physical, whether they're cultural, whether they're societal.
I think with that, sorry to interrupt, Kev, is being present with young people.
Yeah.
So young people quite often get lost in technology and they're not present in the moment. So being present and starting that with a young person that can be quite anxious is also a really good way of taking notice.
Yeah, thank you. All right, yeah, next one. Keep learning. So that's pretty obvious. It's about trying new things. It's about learning about it's about educating yourself basically in whatever interests you. And the final one, give. So do something for a friend or a stranger. Giving back to the community. It's giving of your own time for the benefit of other people. That's the final one of the 5 ways to wellbeing. So if we lose the slides for a sec, those were devised by the New Economics Foundation as sort of ingredients to a life that's going to give you the best chance of being healthy and having well-being. And if you look at all of them, they're all the bread and butter of youth work. So connecting is, youth work's one of the only services to young people that's intrinsically social. School isn't social necessarily, or it's not designed to be. People have social time there, but it's not a social activity necessarily, and youth work is. Keeping active, everyone knows that the youth work involves activity. It involves, field trips, all that sort of stuff, or kicking a ball around, or street work involves walking around the street. So keeping active, again, is intrinsic to youth work. Learning, youth work's an educative process. It's about moving people forward. It's about identifying stuff they want to learn about and helping them learn about it. Connecting, we've done that, haven't we? So connecting, learning, staying active, giving back. If you've been in youth work longer than a year or two, you'll be well aware of the huge push towards encouraging social action, which I was a little bit suspicious of initially when it came around, but in terms of the benefits to young people of volunteering and giving back, and educatively as well, I suppose, I came around to the idea that it was a useful sort of tool in the youth work toolkit. And then taking notice. So again, one of the ways in which the relationship with young people starts is by exploring with them what's going on in their lives, taking a step back, having a think about what they like about their area, what they like about their life, what they don't like, what their relationships are like with other people, who has the power in those relationships, what effect do the young people have. All of that is about taking notice. So I would argue that youth work, just in doing its everyday business of developing relationships with young people and educating, and working with them to further their education, ticks all those boxes of the 5 ways to well-being. And as such, I think it's really, really useful, not just the well-being of young people, but as a partner service, alongside the benefits that the youth work relationship has, as a partner service for other services. So I want to give you sort of 2 examples. One is from my own personal experience, and one is from a mental health pilot scheme that's going on at the moment. And then we're going to split into groups and have a think about, within those 5 ways to well-being, what can youth work do, not just in and of itself, but also to support other services that are related to health and well-being. So I'll start with the example first. Prior to working at the MYA, I was working for Manchester Mind. Now Manchester Mind is a young people's mental health service. It's they offer one-to-one counselling services and advice work, actually, to support people, getting benefits and reducing debt and all that sort of stuff. And the idea behind that was that those were often, housing, debt, finance were some of the biggest problems that young people had. What they had a problem with was engagement of young people and getting young people to stay engaged in the service or engaged in the service initially. And so what we did was, downstairs from all these services, we set up a youth club. And the youth club was a normal, regular youth club, aside from the way that the workers evaluated their work was with reference to the 5 ways to well-being. So when they were doing their debrief, they'd be looking at which ones of the 5 ways to well-being they'd been working towards, and they'd have those conversations with young people as well. So the 5 ways to well-being were on the wall, and any activity that we did, which would be the same as anything they did in the other youth centre, were made with reference to those. Now what that did was it, first of all, made the young people aware of health and well-being. Secondly, because it was taking place in a building that was run by Manchester Mind and owned by Manchester Mind, it broke down the barrier a little bit between mental health services and the young people's regular lives. They were aware of what was going on upstairs, and so they seemed to be a little bit more aware of their own mental health and more willing to engage. And it meant that there were workers who were employed by the organisation on hand to walk with young people as they engage with counsellors, with advice workers, that sort of stuff. So that's one example of how youth work really, really supported a mental health service, not by being expert in mental health necessarily, but by taking advantage of what it's best at. excuse me. The other example is, has anyone come across the I Thrive model of working? Thumbs up if you have. No? Yeah, sort of. Okay. I'll talk you through I Thrive. I Thrive is a pilot scheme for organising mental health provision in neighbourhoods across England. It's been piloted in 70 neighbourhoods, I think, across England at the moment. And it's quite a straightforward model. It's have you got the model there, Sarah? Can we share it?
Yes, just bear with.
Thank you.
Have a look. Oh, it's moving now. That's good, isn't it? It's going the wrong way there. No, it's going the opposite way. Bear with me, guys. Sorry. There we go.
There it is. So yeah, so this is the Thrive model. It was put together by the Anna Freud Centre, who, if you don't know, are a mental health organisation based in London. And there's several neighbourhoods around England that are working now to organise their services in this way. Greater Manchester is one of them, which is how I know about it. And if you look at it, it's pretty straightforward. So in the middle is thriving, those whose current need is support to maintain mental well-being through effective prevention and promotion strategies. So that bit right in the middle, the thriving bit, is where people are doing all right and they're engaged with those bits of the 5 ways to well-being. They're connecting, they're learning, they're taking notice, they're being active, all of that. All of those are ingredients in thriving. And as I've just described, youth work is central to all of that. It provides all of those 5 ways to well-being. And so young people who are thriving, if they're engaged with youth work, won't be doing themselves any harm. They'll be doing themselves some favours. So then, if you move up to top left, getting advice. So getting advice is that's aimed at young people who aren't necessarily thriving, are worried. This is a mental health model, by the way. So, but I think for physical health it may work as well. So they're for people who are struggling, maybe, or have some problems with their mental health that need addressing. Now, again, the youth workers' role in this could be about giving advice themselves, if youth workers are educated and know about mental health. Low-level advice, I think, is perfectly appropriate for youth workers to be giving, but also we can signpost, and that comes back to that relationship that we've got. So as community-based organisations, we should know of all the services that are surrounding us and surrounding our young people, and we can not only signpost young people to those organisations if their needs are beyond our sort of realm of expertise, but we can support those young people in accessing them and talk to debrief with young people after they've been there and make sure that their engagement is useful to them and whatever else. And that, again, I think is a key role for youth services, and something that I think mental health services, certainly in Greater Manchester, mental health services are taking notice of the role that youth work can play in those two sections, thriving and getting advice. The next one is getting help. And so getting help is about is where they need some sort of mental health intervention. So that's about counselling, or it's about CBT, or about group work, or whatever. Again, that's not necessarily within the purview of regular face-to-face youth work, but it might be. There's nothing to stop youth workers running support groups. I'm very, very cautious about recommending that youth workers get involved in sort of specialist health work, and we shouldn't. We should know our own limitations, but that doesn't mean that our limitations don't extend to helping young people with mental health problems. And there are various different social and support groups that we could set up. And we can also, again, support young people in accessing those services that they may be scared of, they may be trepidatious about going into, and we can support them in their engagement throughout those services. So those 3 areas, thriving, getting advice and getting help, for me, seem to have perfect resonance with the role of youth work, first of all, as a kind of as contributing to the 5 ways of well-being, but secondly, because of our relationship with young people, being able to support young people through those services. The next 2 stages are for more sort of young people with slightly more profound problems, so getting more help and getting risk support. So that's when you start sort of involving organisations like CAMS, the National Health Service, and all that sort of stuff, for more intensive support. And again, youth work has less of a role to play there, apart from that role of having the trusted relationship that means we can support young people through that. So the I Thrive model is, yeah, I'm done with the slide now. I think there's nothing after that, is there, that's useful, Sarah?
All we've got is just what we want people to do when they go.
All right, okay, yeah. So the I Thrive model, certainly, as I say, in Manchester, is being used by commissioners, in Greater Manchester, being used by commissioners, and they're factoring in the role of youth work into how they provide that model. So they provided something called safe zones, which are safe places where young people who are in crisis can go and receive support. Those are in youth centres around the city. They're linking in with youth provision, voluntary sector and statutory, as places to refer, well, not refer, yeah, I mean, there's some referral, there's some social prescribing to get young people to engage with youth services in the thriving, in the getting help areas. And there's a recognition that there's this synergy between the two. And I like that. I think it's great. And I think it should be encouraged and we should shout about it. So I want to split into groups again, if that's all right. Have we got enough for groups now?
We have.
A pair and a three, haven't we, I suppose?
We've got.
And what I want to do is I want to have a think about the 5 ways to well-being. So connecting, learning, I can never reel them off one after another. Connecting, learning, noticing, staying active and giving back. And I want you to think about stuff that you may do already in your practice that supports that, supports each of those, or projects that you could set up that would pay particular attention to them. So that's one thing I want to do, have a look at the 5 ways and look at what you're doing and what you could do to support young people's health through those. And then the next thing I'd like you to do is have a think about partner services in your area to do with health and wellbeing. And by that, I mean anything that really contributes to the health and wellbeing of young people. So it could be sports clubs, or it could be your local GP, or it could be your local mental health service or your sexual health service. Any service that's attendant to the needs of young people's health and well-being. Have a think about what work you already do with them and what ways you can use the youth work relationship and the 5 ways to well-being to develop a stronger relationship with them, and so you can support each other. And I'll give you about 15 minutes to do that, if that's all right.
Do we need to recap on the 5 ways, guys? Does anybody need to make any notes on those, or have we got that all down?
I always do.
Fabulous. Okay. I think everybody.
Is that okay? Has anyone got any questions about what I'm asking people to do? No?
Fabulous. Right,
Great.
I'll stop sharing then. Stephen, if you could pop everybody into breakout rooms, that would be fabulous. So you've got 15 minutes, guys.
So I won't go around the groups. Just if you give us, jump in, give us some feedback about what you came up with in that discussion, and whether it was useful, actually, whether the sort of applying the 5 ways of wellbeing to youth work is a useful exercise. That would be handy to know. Who wants to go first? Oh, Hayley, you're a star. Thank you.
I don't mind. Lots of the work that I do with young people, it was really interesting to see the 5 ways of wellbeing, because it does underpin a lot of what I do. So I do a lot of things with young people in the countryside. So I work for a national park. So things like work experience opportunities. We're already outside. We're connecting and hopefully providing positive role models and ways into work. We're active. We're looking at something, making a meaningful difference and giving back by improving something. And I also talked to the other people in the group about John Muir Award, and saying that's quite a, within 4 days you could actually have 4 specific things you do that do link really well to the 5 ways of well-being. That might be a way into doing something positive. They could put on a CV. Yeah. Straightforward, and it's all online, and you can, so that type of thing. Yeah, and we talked about it being a bit of a tricky time to involve some of the other service outside agencies like police and things at the minute, but there were positive opportunities with sports clubs and things. But yeah, I shall pass on to someone else.
No, that's all right. I mean, it's and involving the other agencies, it's kind of one of the things that's occurred to me, and through my work in Greater Manchester was brought home really, is that some of that involvement is just about letting them know what youth work does. You know, it's we started attending the commissioners' meetings for the mental health partnership, and just talked about what the youth services do and how they fit in. And then the commissioners came back and started new conversations with us. So yeah, because a lot of them don't really realise that. I mean, they think youth work is table tennis and need it spelling out that there's a bit more than that, you know. But yeah, thank you for that. It's really useful feedback. Anyone else got anything to update us from their group work session? No, nothing groundbreaking. Excellent. Okay. Well, we're coming to the end then. So thank you. It just remains for us to say, actually, thank you all for coming. I hope it's been a useful exercise and a reasonable degree of fun. We do have a bunch of, as you know, we've got a load more webinars coming up. There's one happening this Thursday, which is run by a friend of mine called Mick Hurley, who's an absolute expert on sort of contextual safeguarding and young people's involvement in crime and exploitation, that sort of stuff. So that's going to be worth checking out. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Before you go, Steve will be putting the evaluation form into the chat. So there it is, it's just popped up. So if I could ask you to click on that before you log off, that'll stay open in your browser and you can fill it in at your leisure. Please do fill it in though, because we're trying to improve these as we go along. So we do pay attention to them. And also we need them for our feedback to the lottery too. So good. Thank you all for coming. Thanks, Sarah, for starting us all off. And hopefully see you all, if not at the next one, some others in the future.